I'd like to introduce everybody. Thank you for coming back. I hope you managed to have a nice break and get yourself something to drink and move around, because it is a little hard sitting in front of a computer all day and, you know, concentrating, and there's a lot of information. And like I was saying, it's been recorded. So if you have missed some sessions, if you needed to do something else, we'll be sending the recordings out after the festival concludes. So right now I'd like to introduce Simon. You probably saw when I was sharing my screen that Simon is the co-founder and CEO of the Loki project. He's an advocate for security and privacy in the digital age, and committed to developing technologies to enhance the public's access to leading secure designs, keeping their information democratic freedoms intact. And an interesting fact about Simon is he serves part-time in the Australian Army as an officer cadet. So that's quite a resume you've got there, Simon.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I have to say the Pinot Noir you sent from the Delmere Vineyards was 10 out of 10.
Yes.
I would drink it again.
Yes.
So thank you for that. But yes, thanks for having me. I'd like to quickly just start by saying that the title for this talk was sort of ruined by Alex, my dear co-worker. He called it Me, Myself, and My Source, where clearly the superior title was going to be Me, My Source, and I. So I renamed it in the slides. Yeah, so today I'd like to talk about a little app called Session. This session is partly about an app called Session, which I found somewhat amusing. But really we're talking about secure messaging. I'm going to go through some details about some of the challenges that we face in the modern day with our secure messaging setup, some of the apps that we commonly use, and some potential problems that we might face in using those, and what we can do about that. A little bit about what we're doing at Session. I'll make that pretty short, about 3 minutes. And then at the end, I really want to sort of broaden the discussion and take it where you all want to take it. So throughout the talk, do feel free to leave questions. I believe they'll be sent to me via moderation, which is really fantastic. I'll stop at a couple of points throughout the initial 20-minute sort of spiel, just in case there are any good questions that can kind of help elaborate or explain on points that I might be talking about, just so we can keep things moving. And then, yeah, at the end, I really want to open it up, you know, talking about threat modeling and all these other sort of things. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you find this interesting and useful. So let's crack right into it. Secure messaging, we all know that it's important, but why is that exactly? Very simply, it's because most of the conversations that we used to have in person are now happening online in huge numbers. And this is everything from our you know, not so important conversations like, you know, our domestic chores, through to our, you know, meeting with friends and that sort of thing, through to the most useless garbage memes you've ever seen in your life. But there's also every other type of conversation happening as well, which is, you know, your legal conversations, your medical conversations. And of course, in journalism, we have a lot of these sensitive conversations where personal information is being shared, sensitive information is being shared. There may be some politically troublesome information trying to cross borders and go within a nation itself. So there's a lot of really sensitive information that is being fed into just three things, which is calls, texts, and emails. And that's a lot of conversations to have. And, you know, journalism has more sensitive conversations than other industries. You know, it's not just the source, you know, that's the common trope. But there's also your editors, other journalists that you might be working with from other publications, all the way through to authorities that might be getting involved in a particular case. There's a lot of conversations that journalists have where security and privacy are much more important than other sectors might be interested in. So I think this is particularly relevant to this sector. The thing is though, when we have conversations, as humans, we just expect that if you sit in a room with someone else and there's no one else around, you can just have that conversation and it can flow freely. And the only trust that has to occur is between you and the person that you're talking with. So if a source is giving you information and you leak it somewhere, that source can be pretty sure that it's you that has leaked that information, which is not, look, it's not perfect, but this is how trust works. You know, there has to be some level of trust in every conversation. But as I'll demonstrate, the internet is very good at telling lots of other people who you're talking to and what you're saying through these three things that we just talked about, being text, calls, and emails. So let's talk about some apps you already use. You're probably just expecting that it's similar to sitting in a room situation. Most of the time, you send a message and boom, that's it. That's all you have to worry about. That's probably not the case. I mean, what I've listed here are some of the most common ways that people talk for various reasons. You probably mainly use the latter one, being email. But there's also many other types of chat apps and messaging services out there. Everything from SMS through to WhatsApp. They all have one thing in common, and that is that there is someone in the middle. And that someone in the middle, I'm going to call Watson for now. It's just a generic term for some middleman that has to be in the middle of your messages so that they can be sent. Now, Watson, he's a nice guy. He seems legit. He's been providing services for free to millions of people for years now. And maybe something's gone wrong. Maybe there's been some leaks or some hacks, but everyone still uses it, so it's probably fine, right? Well, that may be true, but there's also other people in the room as well. Watson, he lives in Donald's neighborhood, so he's got to listen to Donald. He's got to do what Donald says, because everyone's got to do what Donald says. Watson might also be owned by a guy named Mark, who's the world's best advertiser. He has literally profiles on pretty much all of the people on Earth, including those that don't have internet accounts. And that is used for marketing purposes most of the time, but one day that might not be the case. And depending on where Watson is or what's going on, there might be a Xi involved or a Putin involved, or a myriad of other people that could be in this room that goes beyond simply Watson, Donald, and Mark. So suddenly, these are more people that you have to think about that are in the room. You're not just sitting in a room with your source anymore. You actually have to think about, okay, who might I be exposing this to? This is kind of what we call threat modeling in the digital security world. The next problem is routing, because you can't just directly talk to Watson. You have to have an internet connection, and that comes in the form of an internet service provider. So now we have Tony from Telstra and Vince from Verizon. And that's even more people. They can see connections, every connection you make to every service that you use on any device that you have. And most often that's linked directly to your personal identity as well. Internet service providers almost universally, from Africa to Asia, store records of every internet connection you've made in the last few years. I think in Australia it's 2 years. I think they have to store the metadata of all connections for. That might have changed, but in any case, it is in order of years that this information is available to the ISPs themselves and the governments that have mandated these laws in the first place. But it gets even worse than that, because we actually have to have a method of connecting yourself to your source. When you want to send an email address, when you want to send an email, you need an address. You can't just connect magically. It doesn't work like that. So we have to have some sort of personal identifier to be able to contact that person. And more often than not, we're using services that either directly require a phone number or have phone numbers linked up in the back end. If not, it's an email address which suffers from similar problems. These are basically pseudo identifiers for real people. A phone number can be very quickly linked to a real world person through government databases, but also just every database. When you upload that contact into your phone, as you have to do to talk to people on services like Signal and WhatsApp, those phone numbers get plugged straight into your contact database, which gets uploaded to Google and or Apple and or whoever else it might be. And then that serves as another store of information, which may contain information about who you're talking to and when. So suddenly this room is looking a lot busier than just you and your source. And there could be many more people in this room as well that you might have to think about. And that's a lot of trust to put all of these conversations into. Some of them it doesn't matter, and we can all acknowledge that. But a lot of it could matter, or it should matter. And that's something that we should fix. So the question is now, how can we get back to just you and your source? How can we get back to a situation where you can just send information online without being too concerned about who else is in the room? I'm going to go into that now, but if you have any immediate questions now, I'm happy to take a short little stop here and see if there's any questions that I can fill in the meantime.
Yeah, a question has come in, Simon. It's how useful is a VPN in these circumstances? That was from Kathy.
Well, that's a really good question. I'm actually going to get into that a little bit, how we can use internet anonymity tools to sort of cut away some of those trust vectors through the process. We have a better solution than a VPN, but a VPN is definitely a step in the right direction. But what you're doing when you use a VPN is you're swapping out the trust that you have to put in someone. Instead of it being the ISP, you're now replacing the ISP with a VPN provider. Now that's a different trust model. You know, the VPN's whole business model is oriented around them protecting their customers' privacy, but it may also be the case that they're a bit of a honeypot and they might be targeted and heavily monitored. There might be timing analysis. This is all part of threat modeling. So we really have to assess when we use different services, what are we really trying to protect against? If we're just trying to protect against Telstra, then a VPN is a really good solution. Otherwise, you know, maybe we have to think a little bit bigger than that. So good question. If there's no others, I'll continue.
No, that's it for now. I'm sure there'll be many coming in soon.
Beautiful. All right. So here's where things get a little bit more complicated. So now we're gonna try and move from a trusted system where we have all of these trust actors in the room that we have to accept as being there in order to use the service, or we can move to a trustless system where we eliminate each of those trust actors so that the people that we have to interact with to use the service don't get given any information that would allow them to ascertain what is happening in the conversation. And therefore, we don't really have to trust them. It is trustless. So this really great thing happened in the online messaging world in the last decade. And that thing is called end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption is a really neat thing. It uses something called asymmetric cryptography, and there's a bunch of other ways of doing it as well. You have ratcheting structures, perfect forward secrecy, deniable authentication, all these crazy cryptography words that basically mean similar things. The crux of it is that these apps lock the messages and encrypt the contents so that only the people at the endpoints, i.e. the sender and receiver, can actually read the contents of the messages. Really cool thing, very sort of pioneered, not really pioneered, but definitely solidified. And the gold standard comes from this app called Signal, which I hope that pretty much all of you have at this point. That protocol has since been implemented in WhatsApp as well. However, there are lots of concerns that I personally have with WhatsApp, and many other people share these concerns as well, particularly around the way Facebook wants to use WhatsApp, the way they want to integrate it into the advertising platform. So you start to see ads in WhatsApp. Their use of phone numbers, their closed source nature, their unclear relationships with certain governments and certain disclosure requirements as well. So there's, you know, each of these end-to-end encrypted apps has certain benefits, certain properties, and certain downsides as well. Every messaging app is some sort of trade-off. Another one that I have listed here is Wire. You may have also heard of Wicker. You may have also heard of Threema and other ones like this. They're all in the same category, I would say. And it's really good because it means that we can now, as I was saying before, lock down those messages as they pass through all of the different actors. But there's still a lot of information in this room. There's still the fact that this person with this phone number is talking to this person with this phone number. And depending on what the conversation is, that might matter a lot. You know, I mean, the classic example I like to make is the stakeout in the 80s cop movies. You know, you always have the dude sitting in the car with a big camera and they're just literally watching who's going in and out of a building. And that alone is enough to be able to get the people that they're looking for. Now, obviously, those stakeout movies are often about gangsters and bad people, but I think I don't really need to sell this much to journalists. We all understand the value in journalists in particular being able to have conversations without impediments. So how can we get better than this? We're going to start to strip away the people in the room. So we've got this end-to-end encryption thing, and that's really good, but we're now really going to try and strip away the rest of the things. So what if we get rid of personal identifiers? You know, I kind of indicated before how phone numbers and email addresses were quite problematic. How can we get rid of them? Well, the simple answer is we make a use of the same technology that end-to-end encryption actually relies on, and we bring it straight to the front of the user interface. This is asymmetric encryption. it's basically a fancy way of saying you have some secret information, someone else has some other secret information. They create public information and share that public information with each other. They can now multiply the data that they have by each other's public information and exchange information without anyone else on Earth being able to decrypt that information except the intended recipient. The public information I was just talking about there is called a public key, and it kind of looks like this. This is a session ID. This is what we call it. Its technical term is a session ID, is a public key, sorry. And it's pretty much just like a phone number in our system, pretty much just like a phone number and email address. Sure, it's long, it's a little bit cumbersome. Yeah, I think this is a much better way to do it. It eliminates this personal identifier problem. It makes sure that we actually have that anonymity that comes with not linking it to our very heavily tracked phone numbers, and tracked not just by governments, but by marketing agencies and everything else as well. You know, a phone number is a very public piece of information.
Sorry, Simon, someone's just asked, what is Signal?
Okay. Signal is a chat app that uses end-to-end encryption. So what I was talking about before, where the messages can be sent from one person to another and literally no one else on Earth can read those messages. Signal is sort of the current industry leading standard of that technology, end-to-end encryption. So if you're interested in that, I can talk about that more. We're actually based on Signal. So our app, we have taken this end-to-end encryption idea, but we're going several steps further than that. So hopefully I'll be able to explain this throughout the rest of this presentation. It won't last too much longer. Yeah, it's basically a chat app. All right, I hope that answers the question. So if we take away the phone numbers that they use in Signal though, Signal requires that you register with the phone number, which is obviously quite problematic for a number of reasons that I've kind of touched on already. But let's bring it to a journalism example. You have a source, they're worried about being personally identified. They don't want to use their personal phone number to have a conversation with you. But because Signal is the leading standard for end-to-end encryption, they feel kind of compelled to do so. And that's obviously not ideal. So if we can get rid of the phone numbers, that may not be so much of a concern. They can have some protection with pseudo anonymity through this public key system that I'm trying to demonstrate here. So now we're here. If we get rid of those phone numbers, we have eliminated those personal identifiers, the databases and so forth. So we're moving forward, but we still have Watson in the middle. We still have Tony and Vince who can kind of figure out what's going on. And then obviously all of the people that they're associated with being the Donalds, the Shees, the Marks of the world. So this may be okay. At this point, you may decide, look, I don't really care at this point. This is good enough for me and that's fine. But what we're trying to do at Session is eliminate trust. So this threat modeling doesn't actually have to be done by the end user. So we're going to strip away everything. So it's just back to you and the source. We're going to do that by next eliminating Watson. So we do that through something called the Loki service node network. This is something that is unique to us. We've developed a decentralized network of computers that is able to store, retreat, and route messages all over the world using our Loki blockchain system. But we've been developing for over 2 years now. It's been live for I think it's been 18 months now. And it's a really effective way at generating redundancy and also making sure that there is no central person anymore. So there is no Watson that sits in the middle and can figure out all of the messages that are being sent between people. It's all now distributed and broken up so that there is no continuous chain of messages that can be linked together, which is a really interesting property. So we've now gotten rid of Watson, which is good. We can kind of ignore that as a factor now, but there are still people in the room. If Donald and Mark are really motivated, they can get in touch with Tony and Vince. They can do some correlations, some timing analysis to see exactly when the source and you are talking. And this is still not ideal. It's a pretty extreme circumstance, but as I said, we're all about eliminating trust here at Session. So we're just going to get rid of them. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to do that by using onions, which is a a bit of a joke, but we actually are going to use onion routing, which is a type of, it's actually an application, another application of asymmetric encryption that I was talking about before. It's a method of passing a packet of information around the internet using wrappers of encryption so that interim relays are sort of, the connection is broken up and split across many different nodes so that you can be sure that when your packet reaches its destination, no one in the middle can build a full story of the connection. So how it works is you have a packet, you encrypt that 3 times, you pass it to each server only gets to unwrap 1 layer, and they keep passing it along and unwrapping it until the last one comes along, they talk to the destination, and then the same happens in reverse. The effect of this is that the first relay that you use knows that you're sending something, but they don't know where it's being sent to. The middle relay knows only that a packet is being sent by someone to somewhere. That's all they get to know. And the third one gets to know that someone is connecting to the final destination. But thanks to HTTPS and things like that, they won't actually get to see what's in it, but they don't know who sent it in the first place. So pretty much it allows you to connect to the internet, anywhere on the internet, anonymously by breaking up the trust through the chain, and it becomes trustless. So now we've got this. It effectively means that we can now confuse the hell out of Tony and Vince. They're now bewildered. They have no idea what's going on, which effectively means that they're out of the picture because the service nodes are in the same sort of boat. They don't really know what's going on anymore. It effectively means that we're now back to this. So this is session. This is how it works, but this is just the start of the problem. Things are really leaky by default. You know, we're dealing with secure messaging. We're trying to make it easy for people to have that confidence that they can have a conversation without worrying about all of the other people in the room. But you know, we can't protect against operating system level attacks, for instance. I want to make a point about TikTok. If you have TikTok on your phone, getting something like Session or Signal will not help you because TikTok can literally install and run executables on your device at will. So when you have software like that installed on your phone, you know, there is very little that an end-to-end encrypted chat app is going to be able to do. So you have to take your security a little bit more seriously if you're really talking this deep. But all we're trying to do is give people that confidence that once they're using the app and they're using a safe device, they don't have to think about it anymore. They can just have that conversation. But it's really up to you. You know, you have to take this control. These technologies exist, but they require the end users that will benefit from them to actually use them for it to work. And it's not about being paranoid. It's not being about conspiratorial or anti-establishment or anything like that. I mean, as mentioned before, I myself serve a little bit part-time in the Australian Army. I love Australia. I think it's a great country. But having this confidence is really important, especially in my opinion overseas, but also for journalists all over the world. So if you're interested in Session, I'd encourage you to check out getsession.org. It's available on all platforms at the moment. It's been out for maybe, I think it's been 4 or 5 months now. And yeah, really it's up to you to decide whether or not this suits you. It's a little bit less reliable than other chat apps because it doesn't have that centralized functionality, but it does provide a lot more privacy protections. So if this is something that you feel like would be good for you, then it's really up to you to decide whether or not you want to spread it. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So,
sure, Simon, there's a couple of questions.
Yeah,
would you like to address those? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so this one's from Adeline, says, what's the best way to educate sources about security? Some people have low tech maturity. That's the first one.
That's a really great question. We work with a couple of organizations that deal directly with whistleblowers in high profile situations. And, you know, we hear from them that educating people that need this security the most is often the most difficult. You know, these people are often quite marginalized. They don't have access to a lot of technology, and, you know, they're often not the most well-educated people either. So there is often, and tech maturity as well, as you point out, you know, there really is a challenge there. But I think my personal view on this is that by making access to the tools easier, educating people on how to use it is not so hard. You know, we've tried to put in a lot of effort to make the app really intuitive, so it matches the expectations that most people have when they interact with the chat app. So same sort of functionality, you know, you have an address, you send it to someone, they connect, then you send messages. The UI is extremely similar. If you start involving things like Tor and you start involving some of the older, more legacy applications that can do similar sorts of things, you really are asking a lot of people, you know, to get their laptop, to install this certain thing, to ensure it's set up correctly, to make sure that their device is secure. And, you know, there's a whole wide range of problems with that. So my personal view on this is that we need to make it as easy as possible for people at the lowest level to just be able to hit install a similar way they would any other app, and use an interface that they're probably already somewhat familiar with, that doesn't have a very high learning curve. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and then Corrine says she teaches journalists to use TikTok as a production app. Are you saying it gets around end-to-end encrypted messages sent using session or signal?
I'm not saying it does do that, but I am saying that it is effectively thinly veiled malware. The problem with TikTok is that it requests so many permissions from the device that just fly under the radar. And people have reverse engineered it dozens of times now, and they all point to the same conclusions. This app can literally remotely download and install and execute any software it wants from anywhere on the internet and run it on your phone without your permission. Whether or not it is actively using that for nefarious activities, no one has yet been able to prove, but no social media app needs this functionality. This is very, very clearly a very dangerous application that you should not have on your phone. You should not encourage people to use. I would strongly recommend that if you have it, you get rid of it. I would even go as far as to say that you wipe your entire phone if you have it. It is a seriously dangerous application. None of the permissions that it requests at this extreme level can be justified. It just doesn't make any sense.
And it's so popular, isn't it? Someone's asking.
Well, it's popular as well because they've dumped so much money into advertising for it. You know, they didn't really have to advertise Instagram or Snapchat or any of these others. They just kind of organically appeared. But I get bombarded with advertisements for TikTok, and I think that's really amplified its success, I guess you'd say. Who is funding it? All sources point to the Chinese government, but that's just I can't verify that right here, right now, but it is certainly cause for concern.
Certainly the rumors, isn't it? Someone's asking, is there some TikTok alternatives that they could use instead?
Well, I mean, you know, there's many other types of social media out there. I don't know what you are using TikTok specifically for, whether it's to reach a certain audience or to produce a certain kind of content, but I'm not overly aware of what you're using it for, and I don't use it myself for reasons which should be fairly obvious. So I don't really know what to offer there. I mean,
there's
Snapchat
a lot they could Google. Yeah,
Snapchat has tons of the very similar sorts of functionality. So does Instagram. I mean, say what you will about Facebook, you may not like Instagram for the same reasons, but if you're happy with Instagram, if you're happy with TikTok, you're almost certainly happy with Instagram. I'd be a lot more happy with Instagram if that's the sort of audience that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Someone else has said, what are some problematic T&Cs to look for in messaging services?
T's and C's are difficult because there's a lot that secure messaging apps have to say, whether or not they actually mean it. So for instance, we have a terms of service, but it is kind of a moot point. You know, everything we do is open source. Everything we do is openly modifiable. You can do whatever you want with it. And therefore, you know, saying that users have to agree to a terms of service is a kind of, it's a necessary hurdle because, you know, the app stores require that you have a terms of service and that you meet certain license agreement requirements. So yeah, I don't think the terms of service are actually a very good metric for whether or not a secure messaging app is meritorious or not. I think terms of service is almost what would you call it? It's a necessary evil, but messaging apps should really speak for themselves. You know, they should be open source. You should be able to see what's in them and build them yourself, as is the case with Telegram, although that's not end-to-end encrypted, Signal, although that uses phone numbers, and Session, which doesn't have either of those problems. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Just Zoom, that's a question that's been coming up a lot lately, about Zoom, about how secure is that?
Well, Zoom is about as secure as all of the others, you know, be it Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Skype, all these others. Zoom did really well recently because they kind of did some stuff at the operating system level to make it load really fast. But that exposed a bunch of vulnerabilities that people thought was quite bad. So that's since been fixed. Personally, my view on video chat apps is that they will never be very secure. And that's purely from the basis that end-to-end encryption using video is almost impossible just because of the amount of data that's being sent. You can do end-to-end encrypted voice calls quite well. Your phone can keep up with that. It can encrypt the data and send it over the internet at a fast enough rate that it comes through on the other end with some quality loss, but it's manageable. Video, though, you're talking about very high bandwidth streams, sort of maxing out what's available at the local level, and then asking your computer to encrypt that on the fly and then send it via UDP stream out of the computer is a very, very tall order from the kind of internet and devices that people currently have. So I don't think you're going to see the same kind of security that you see with end-to-end encrypted chat apps on video calls at all. And so therefore I would say, if you're having sensitive conversations, you're better off doing it using something like Signal, maybe even WhatsApp or Telegram, and using the end-to-end encrypted voice call functionality. That's the best way that you're going to be able to have a secure voice conversation over the internet.
Were there any more questions about that? Otherwise, there's something I'm quite interested to ask Simon before, if anyone's got any more security questions. I'll just look at it in the chat, but I'll ask Simon while I'm waiting. I saw that your business was funded by cryptocurrency. I know that's not quite what you were going to talk about in this chat, but for those people setting up a business and freelancing, what are some steps about getting that kind of funding? Like, how do you go about that?
Well, I might just move into my little spiel, giving you a little bit more background on where I come from, on what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
With Loki, and then I can answer the question. So yeah, basically we have a parent company called Loki, which we started about more than 2 years ago now. And using the Loki cryptocurrency as the backing for the network infrastructure, we've been able to create 2 new products that protect people's privacy. One is Session, the chat app I've been talking about today. The other is LokiNet, which is an onion routing network. I've sort of mentioned onion routing before. We have a team of 25 engineering operations and marketing staff for a registered charity, an open source software foundation based in Melbourne mostly. And yeah, we were able to obtain a fair bit of funding through our Loki cryptocurrency offering, which we completed in 2018. And that's kept us through until now and into the future as well. It'll probably be the main source of funding for us for some time yet. So that's a little bit on us. What we're trying to do is use this decentralized technology to create, to fill gaps in the secure and privacy tool market where we see those gaps can be filled. So obviously Session is sort of the main one for us. Our plan is basically to get people using our app now that we've built it. It's getting better every day. I mentioned before, it's somewhat unreliable now, but it's getting much better. But the best way to make this technology happen is if people actually start using it in fairly large numbers. And the thing with chat apps, which is pretty annoying for me, is that it's a two-way system. You know, if there's no one to talk to on the other end, people don't stick around and use the app. So in order for it to succeed, it really has to succeed through word of mouth. So that's where you might come in. If you think it's of value, maybe check it out, maybe have a look. We're always happy to answer questions or take ideas about it. We're very passionate about it, so we'd love to chat. And yeah, but at this point, I was going to move on to the security questions. We've kind of already got into it. In regards to your question around cryptocurrency funding, I'd say that there has been there was a fairly long period where cryptocurrency funding was a really good way of getting sort of crowdsourced money for various ventures. I'd say that window's probably past now, but it may come back. But I think for people starting businesses that are not directly involved in crypto already, I think it's definitely something that it's an opportunity that is long gone, unfortunately. But it is still a very interesting field. There's advancements happening every day. It's really interesting to keep up with. But as far as, I don't think I've seen any journalism related or directly journalism related projects that have sprung up in crypto. But I have seen lots of examples of tools that are being produced that are useful to journalists. One is Loki in Session. Obviously, I'm trying to sell that pretty hard, but there's another one that's quite interesting called Arweave, which is a way of paying a small amount of money, like $1, for information to be uploaded to a network that will never go down. If you put information in this thing called the Arweave, it will never, ever disappear. So some journalists in Russia have started uploading all of the state media to the Arweave. So it's permanently available, so that if there are any changes in the state media, if they take articles down or they modify them, there's an immutable record of every article that they ever published. So they can kind of see how the narrative is changing over time without threat of their own hosting service going down at any point. So that's another interesting example of how the decentralized world is trying to help the plight of journalists, especially today where everything is so interconnected and internet oriented.
Right. Someone just had a question earlier about your earlier discussion of Session. She said, can you clarify what you mean by unreliable and slow?
It's not so much slow. It's just that it's quite a complex app. So normally with chat apps, all you're doing is you're contacting a single server and you're sending a simple message, and then the server does all the rest. But with Session, you're kind of your own server as well. You have to be able to be aware of the entire service node network. You have to be able to create these complex connections to create that anonymity to those. You have to be able to send to a different swarm and then pull from a different swarm. There's a decentralized push notification system as well. So the conditions under which Session has to operate in order to provide the security that we've been talking about today, it has to make a few trade-offs in regards to message reliability. So for instance, we were getting like a 95% send through rate, which is really bad when we first launched the app in our early testing. That's now gone up a lot, but there's been a couple of features that have really not been overly successful yet that we're still working on. One of which is multi-device. So for instance, with so let's say WhatsApp, right? You can look at it. Oh, actually, that's a bad example. Let's say Signal or Telegram or Facebook Messenger. You can have that messenger open on multiple screens or multiple devices, and they all sync up and it all works great. That's fairly easy to do on a centralized chat application. Very, very hard to do on a decentralized chat application where there is no central server. Your phone and your computer run their own different clients, and they each have to pull messages from similar places and put them similar places and then talk to each other, make sure they've all got it synced up and lined up correctly. It's a lot more complicated. And that's caused some issues when there's been a sending failure or other things, just like the internet connection dropping out or whatever. There's been a few instances of that causing issues. But if you just use Session on one device, i.e. your phone or your desktop, not both, it is actually very reliable and provides a lot of security. So it may be worth it. And as time goes on, as we get further and further into the development process, we're making it better and better each day. So at the moment, things may not be as slick and as fast as Telegram, but as time goes on, that will get better and better. So I hope that answers your question.
And someone's just asked, why should we trust the security on Loki sessions any more than other similar programs?
That's a really good question. Again, it comes back to that threat modeling idea. Like, who are you worried about? I would say with Loki in session that the trust that you put in is basically down to whether or not you think we're bad actors or whether or not you think that we've been compromised. But those concerns can be alleviated by the fact that we are fully open source. We're in the process of attaining our first code audit, which is a third-party entity basically looking over our code, making sure there's no security vulnerabilities in it. And yeah, I guess it really just comes down to who you want to trust. You know, do you want to trust Facebook and the 2,000 people that work there or whatever? Do you want to trust WeChat? That's kind of a joke. You shouldn't trust WeChat. It's very widely known that the Chinese Communist Party literally see they pay people 24/7 to sit at a computer and look at people's chat feeds and make sure nothing bad is happening, and that's very widely known. So, it really depends on your threat model. Who are you concerned about? What is the threat that you're trying to analyze here? And how does that company or how does that service attempt to mitigate those concerns? I think we do a pretty good job at mitigating those concerns. A lot of international people are concerned about our domicile in Australia. They think that the Assistance and Access Bill of 2018 is a big threat, and the Australian government can effectively force us to put backdoors in our application. That is not true, but that is a perception that is out there that we have to fight every day. So yeah, it's a good question.
So Simon, I know that you do workshops, don't you? You do some, you set up tables at various conferences and you show people how to secure their data. Is that something you're still offering? Oh, well, you can't at the moment, I guess, but is that something you're going to continue doing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to throw my hat in the ring and try and give people my take on security and talk to them about what they're actually trying to achieve. I think that's often missed in the conversation about secure apps. If you read some publications, they'll be very extreme. They'll say, you need to run Linux, you need to have, all these different tools, you need to not use these, you must use these. But, there's obviously, the world is not black and white. There is some tolerance that you have to have for things that you don't really care about or are not concerned about. Like, for instance, you think Apple's probably okay, so you're okay using a Mac, whatever. Facebook, you talk to your parents on it, whatever. So you got to navigate that landscape. So I think there's a lot of I have all of these apps. Except TikTok, I have Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, all of these installed on my phone. So I mean, that should say a lot about the way I treat threat modeling. I do some things with other apps. I don't do other things with other apps. I have methods and strategies to be able to achieve what I want without sacrificing too much convenience. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very tough, but I'm always happy to help people out if they do have any specific concerns about what they're trying to achieve and try and work with them to figure out how to get around it.
Fantastic. I'll just put the address of your company here so that, I mean, it's on the website as well, but I'll put it in the chat if people want to go and have a look at your website and have a bit more of a read about what you do. Well, that was fantastic. Has anyone else got any more questions for Simon before he has a well-earned break? So people are just saying thank you. I know I know that sometimes when we talk about stuff like this, the lingo can be quite dense, but I think you may manage to clarify it quite well for people there, and they found it very helpful.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, if you do have any questions or concerns, do feel to reach out to us. Getsession.org is the app, and then Loki.Foundation is if you're more interested in us in the background. Otherwise, you can reach me at simon@loki.network if you want to directly send me an email. I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
That's great. I'll put that in the chat in a minute. All right. Well, thank you very much, Simon. That was brilliant. Really appreciate you coming on and